Welcome to Grace and Truth with Gale and Johnny Rowlett.
We base this entire podcast on John 1:14, where it says Jesus was full of grace and truth. And those two words don't necessarily always go together. So we love that there's tension between those two words and that he was the perfection of both grace and truth. Join us today as we dive deep into his word and revelation and see how he unfolds both grace and truth.
Welcome to another episode.
So exciting. Another episode. It has been a crazy, actually, while we're filming this, it's election day 2024. And I don't know about you, but it is exciting to say the least. It's kind of like a birthday that you thought would never come, like the big one. And then all of a sudden it's here and it's exciting. For some people, it's like, maybe for some people it's not so exciting. I don't know, but the day is here and I hope that you got out and voted, and we're praying in advance
For this country. And for the outcome.
Yeah.
But regardless of the outcome, we still know that God is still on the throne and that he doesn't need to be elected because he's always king.
Yes.
So that's the hope in this journey, that regardless of what happens today or tonight or whenever we find out who wins, that God still wins in the end.
Right.
So that's our hope.
And it's been an interesting journey for us because, we're about kingdom and we're about people and loving people, but we also have our own beliefs and our own standards and our own policies that we vote for. And I think it's just best that we say we vote the Bible. We do not vote for a certain person. We vote policy and we vote the Bible that's going to clearly represent the policy. And I'm pretty sure anybody that watches us knows that that's
right. But I think the biggest thing is throughout all of this, regardless of your stance, regardless of who wins, whether you agree or disagree, that the bottom line is that we need to remember that we need to love our neighbor as ourselves.
That's good.
Love God first and then love our neighbor as ourselves. The number one commandment. And I think in all of this, a lot of times that gets lost in the shuffle and in the stance and in the cross that you're willing to die on and all of that.
That's good.
But that's what we need to remember, is that we need to love God and love people.
Speaking of that, just speaking the actual word over that, 3 different times, actually 4 different times. But what's interesting in the synoptic gospels, which means kind of the same gospel, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in all 3 of those gospels, someone comes up to Jesus and says, "What's the greatest commandment?" And he says, "Love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." But in the 4th gospel, the John, he says it a little bit different. And it's just so important to catch the nuance of it, because it's his reiterating the fact that, in essence, if you love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, you will by default show that out by loving your neighbor. Right. And I just think that's something we live by. Now, I'm not saying that there's not times that I get peopled out.
And it's not always the easiest one. And I think that's why it's the number one. Because if it was easy, it would just be like down the pipeline and we don't need to worry about it because it kind of comes naturally.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come naturally.
I think it's funny how as soon as I'm like, God's working on me on that, you got to love your neighbor, then it's always the strangest neighbor that shows up. You know what I mean? Like the strange, like, really, God, this is the guy, or this one, really is difficult. And I think it's important that it doesn't mean you have to like everybody.
Or agree with them.
Yeah.
But we need to love them.
To show love.
Yes.
And part of showing love is realizing that people think differently. I was in a Walmart one time and I saw this gentleman, and and I grew up in my pastor was black. I grew up in the military church, in a military church where our whole church was mixed racially. So I didn't really experience racism like I know some people do, and then this in the last 4 years, I feel like racism has almost been kind of forced on us. That's been like the thing that we have to. Everybody has to talk about race, and I remember walking into Walmart and I saw this black gentleman, and I'm looking at him and I'm thinking the only thing different between me and him, other than our skin, our what color, the what is it, the malignant,
The
not
epidermis?
malignant.
The
It's not
epidermis?
malignant. Yeah, the there's a what makes me freckle?
Melatonin?
Melatonin. The only thing that's
It's not
different.
melatonin.
It isn't. It's. I think that's it. It's not malignant. I know that. So come on. But the only thing that's different, really, other than our skin color, is what's in between our brain. What goes on in our thought process. Maybe I don't know with this guy. All I know is the only if I cut that guy, he's going to bleed the same that I bleed. If I know every bone, every ligament is exactly the same as mine, every part and portion of him, and beyond all that, I know that the breath of God is what gives him life, and it does me as well.
Right.
So just because somebody thinks differently doesn't mean that they're any less loved by God, and I think that's so important right now.
And that helps us when we realize that. It helps us then to love our neighbor, is when we realize that they're loved by God just the same as we are.
Yeah.
And so then that makes the opportunity that much easier.
Yeah, and speaking of that, then we just got back from North Carolina, and
down there or up there, whatever direction you're from, over there or whatever, there in North Carolina, you can see people loving each other, helping each other build back up from what they lost and all the devastation. And if you've not been, or if you don't know about it, go online, look on social media, and look to see what's really going on over there, because it is pure devastation. Yeah. And even it's going to take them years to rebuild what was lost in an instant. So I'm sure no matter how long from now you watch this video, I'm sure they're still going to be needing your help.
Wow, that's really good. And people ask, how did you get involved? And all of a sudden you're going to this. And all I can tell you is we were available. That's it.
Right. And it's so easy to get connected. Yeah. It's so easy to.
And the loving your neighbor is specifically what drove us to it, is the idea that we cannot sit idly by while our neighbors are literally drowning, literally hurting.
Yes. Right.
So we went, and part of the deal was, I have to give my wife some awesome props. It was actually an interesting thing, is that if you don't know exactly what I do, but we're booked for meetings usually 6 months out, and we're usually pretty solidly booked, and it leaves us sometimes it doesn't leave us a lot of room for moving around, for changing our jobs, if you will. And this year was really strange. Well, actually about 2 years ago, Gale woke up with a word for our year, and that was make room. Make room for the move of God. Make room for the Holy Spirit. And anytime the Lord ever works through Gale, and this is for all you husbands, I know that spiritually, the head of the home, all that kind of stuff, I don't look at that as one person has dominance over the other. I think we're a team. And when she got a word, I just jumped on it, and we walked in it and believed in it, and we walked that out. And so when it came time to the end of this year, and our scheduling was not coming together, and it wasn't for lack of trying.
Right, and even the ones we did have got canceled last minute, very last minute.
Oddly, strange, and
Yeah.
I never got. I wouldn't say I did get frustrated, but I never got worried. I never got stressed. I just have. We have been practicing making room for the last 2 years, and so we've seen God work it out all the time. Every time that something comes up like that, then He puts us in the positions that He wanted for us to be in. And so I was like, you know, the bookings didn't come, so here we're available. And we just so happened to be booked in Statesville, North Carolina. And a week before, or a week and a half, or some before this all went down, uh, we were in Michigan, heading to Statesville, North Carolina. And this horrible hurricane hit, and somehow kind of almost looked like a skipping stone. It like skipped right over Florida. I mean, it hit Florida, but it hit it bad. And there's definitely places that I don't want to make light of that. But it hit it and skipped and just went right through Georgia, right up to North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, and it devastated that area. And people ask, how does a hurricane make landfall that far in? And the only thing that we've heard as far as any kind of thing that makes sense to me, and I'm not a person that understands all this stuff at all, but that it was going so fast that it just pushed right into North Carolina. And unfortunately, as much as they were how could they be prepared? There was no way to really be prepared for a hurricane in North Carolina. And not only that, it didn't just cause flooding, and that was horrific. The flooding was horrific, but it caused a what did he call it? What did the one gentleman call it? A it was a movement of dirt and landslides, and there's a word for it, geological event. It was a geological event where devastation, what we saw up in those mountains, I can't even begin to I mean, we saw waters that had risen over 100 feet, and more so, we saw people in the mountains that never should experience any kind of a flood, and the half a mountain would fall off and sweep out and take out 30 houses. And the devastation that we've seen in the last few weeks has been hard, horrific. And but my wife is like, we're gonna go, and we're gonna go love our neighbors, and so we did. What really spoke to your heart as far as what drove you to be so passionate about going to serve in North Carolina?
Well, I think that that's what we're really called to do. Just like, the Bible says, love your neighbor, and that's showing love, is helping people in their time of need. And we heard different things going on as far as who was helping and who wasn't helping, and we realized that we needed to go. And that's just what I felt like God was showing us and kind of leading us into that direction. And doors were opening for us to be able to help out in these different areas. And so we took the opportunity to just walk through those doors. So we're, and then again, for Christmas, we're going to help get gifts for different family members. We're going to adopt families to then go and deliver those gifts to the different families affected. And there's so many that it's actually
overwhelming.
Yeah, it is overwhelming, because you just want to help everyone, and you realize that like they always say, it takes a village, and it really does take a lot of people to help the enormous amount of people that have been affected in one way, shape, or form. They may not have lost their house, but they lost maybe their car to get back and forth to work, or they lost their job because their job was wiped off the map, or
they lost a loved one.
Yeah, their loved one, or they did lose their house, or I mean, it's every different level. People have been affected in one way, shape, or form. So it's definitely, I have a friend that lives in Asheville, and that she has everything. She wasn't affected at all. Her car, her house, everything perfect. But she lost her job because her job was totally flooded out, and so she doesn't know if they'll ever be able to
Wow.
reopen. So now she's on the journey of trying to find a new job, and what does that look like for her? She's feeling, I'm sure, blessed that she still has a roof over her head, so people like that don't always want to reach out for help, but at the same time, that's what other people are here for, is to help in financial, or getting a shovel or a hammer or a skid steer or whatever, and loving your neighbor and go helping them.
And I think I just would like to take a minute here and just brag on my wife, and she would want that, but she was relentless. That's the thing is, I'm not trying to put myself down, but my understanding of how bad the situation was limited to where we were. So the very first thing that we went into West Jefferson because we had a contact there and boots on the ground. And so we went in there just primarily helping that area and asking them what they needed. And then on a daily basis, they would say, okay, we have enough water. Now we need this. And we have enough of this. And now we need this. And it was very fluid and flexible. And so we would just make runs, and we had a lot of donations, a lot of people that helped us, got behind us, and we would make runs to areas that weren't affected and just buy all the stuff we could buy, come back, give it to them. But Gale started to hunt, and she found these Facebook pages whereby people were able to. You want to just explain it?
Well, if you do any sort of research in the western North Carolina area, there's so many pages that you can get connected to, and people telling you exactly what's needed, where it's needed. You of course you have to be careful because unfortunately there are a lot of scammers, but
Yeah.
there's still that many more people that are real and that really need our help. So it was easy for me to reach out and to get connected with somebody in the area that we were connected to. We There was a camp set up there, and if you talk to any of the leaders or the people that are running that camp, they all just said, it's a total God thing how this whole thing is even transpired, and that most of these people they don't even do that for a living. They like our IT people or software developers, or this guy owns his own construction business. Now, you would think to a degree that might help. Yeah, logistics wise, that probably helps. He probably has a lot of experience in logistics, but it wasn't his company coming up there and helping. It was him, because his company was hardly affected, was not hardly, was, because hardly in that phrase would be barely, but
Yeah.
he was
Lightly affected?
No, he was hardcore affected by
okay.
this hurricane.
Got it.
So his business was, greatly affected. Greatly
Right.
was the word I was looking for.
Yes.
His business was greatly affected, so he's kind of in a lull right now while he's got people working for him, helping get that company back up and running. And so he's over here helping his brother that needs it more than he does.
Crazy.
So he realized that, God was pushing him in this direction, and he walked through the door that was available. And so that's what we try to do. I really wanted to do it when, I think it was Hurricane Ian that went through Florida a couple years ago, and but the doors just didn't open.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately we weren't able to help, but
Well,
that's what I love to do is I love to go in and help people.
Actually, boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Putting actions behind your words.
Yeah. And let me kind of finish that story, because what we did is we went in and to West Jefferson area and all those surrounding areas. And then because of her, then we were off, and we were looking at Swannanoa. We were looking at Old Fort. We were looking at Spruce Pines and Burnsville, and then we had to come down here to Florida because another hurricane hit here, and we had to check our place, and in my mind, okay, we did our job. But because she had seen all of those other towns and the even greater devastation that was that, it just sat on her and sat on her and sat on her. And we had been here about 3 days, and she just said, she woke up one morning and she said, we're not done. We can't sit here and do nothing while our neighbors are hurting. And so I just know enough, been around enough to know that when the Holy Spirit's leading her, then let's be obedient to it. And so we put the word out there. We were able to rent skid steer. We were able to get equipment. We were able to get more finances, and we took off again. And was served in, another 10 days up there. And that's when we came across Pensacola, North Carolina, not Pensacola, Florida. Pensacola, North Carolina. And we had one contact there. His name was Seth, and he was on the volunteer fire department. And he was a great contact. And then he introduced us to who she's talking about, Brian, at the camp. And we go into that camp. And the first thing I thought was so great is up until that point, everything was sort of chaotic. We walked in that camp and they had it down pat. They had a whole tent that was like a military tent with all the computers and logistics and teams going out here and taking supplies there and going to help these people and help those. And we walked in and said, hey, this is the equipment we got and this is the manpower we got. And next thing I know, they started putting people on our team and having our teams go here and go there and go do this. And I don't know how to run a skid steer. I don't know how to run this equipment. And God still used us to help kind of facilitate and manage a team whereby all we ended up doing was just going and helping the team. So if we needed to dig, if we needed to move things, if we needed to bring them water, bring them food, relay information, we were just going back and forth. And it just,
well as cleaning.
Yeah, cleaning.
Moving garbage.
Yes, moving and working. We had to do a lot of working. You had to do a lot of serving in the camp. You served food. You did all kinds of stuff. And then what's really cool is in the middle of that, God brings people. And, you're so busy going, and then you look around and you just seen God just move these chess pieces. And we got to meet some of the most incredible people that were so gifted and so talented using a skid steer. And we put them on jobs that were way too big for the size of our skid steer. And they got it done. Moved rivers, literally moved mountains and moved the rivers where they go and put in driveways and culverts. And I just sat back, and our pastor was asking us this morning over coffee. He was like, what made you go, I guess, and what he was doing was he was kind of bragging on us and saying, you guys just, you did this and I'm so proud of you. You went there and went there. And I said, I'm not trying to downplay all that, but I can tell you that it's not about our abilities.
It's not about our willingness.
It was about our availability.
Right.
And why is that important? It's important because that doesn't seclude anybody. If you'll just make yourself available, then God could put you in positions you never dreamed of being and see things you never dreamed of seeing. And I think I just want to close today with speaking to that we need your availability. We are not done. And I'm not going to get political with all that, but I can tell you that the world seems to have moved on, but North Carolina is not moved on. The problem is still so enormous. It's hard to get your head around how much need there still is there. And so what Gale has done is she's gotten together with another group, and they've made a decision to help. I know she spoke to it a little bit, but I'm going to push it a little bit more, is we're going to adopt families for Christmas. And in essence, what we are doing as Johnny Rowlett Ministries is we're going to raise funds, and we're going to say, we've raised this much money, and with this much money, we're going to adopt this many kids.
Or families.
Or families, sorry. I saw something up there just before we left. We were the day was getting long, and we were heading out. And I walked to these tents, just looking at all the stuff that for people's supplies and stuff for people. And there was these two kids, and they had found like a Tonka toy of a truck, and another found like a loader, and they're out there just playing in the dirt in the middle of this chaos, in the middle of this destruction. And you know that the mom brought those kids there because they needed supplies, food, and their life was for whatever time frame there was normal because they had toys to play with. And I know that people may think, and even I thought, well, what are toys?
But that's huge to kids. That's their life. That's
Some
their
type
world.
of normalcy,
Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing, and we're asking you to get behind us and help facilitate that. We have Venmo, we have PayPal, we have all
And we
the
can
different.
put that in the show notes.
Yep.
All those connections if you'd like to help us help others.
Be available. And that's what I'm going to leave you with today. Love your neighbors. By loving your God, and this goes all the way back to what I said. If you love God, then you will love your neighbors. And loving your neighbors enough to be available for them. And if you can't be there physically, you can be there financially. CNN, MSNBC, all of the major networks have left North Carolina, and we are here to raise a flag and say, don't forget about Western North Carolina. Please help us to help them. Right. God bless y'all.
Thank you for joining.